I'm Geof Isherwood, artist extraordinaire, and this is the True North Country Comics podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics podcast, dedicated to celebrate Canadian comic book and graphic novel creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. On this episode, I chat with Geof Isherwood about his comic book projects and his artistic style. Please like and subscribe to this website by hitting the subscribe button so you'll be notified about new podcast interviews and article posts. This podcast is available wherever podcasts are enjoyed. Please like, follow, and subscribe. Toronto Comicon is a spectacular 3-day sci-fi, horror, anime, and gaming event in Canada that attracts thousands of people to come to the Metro Toronto Convention Centre in Toronto, Ontario, taking place from March 20th to 22nd. Every year, Toronto Comicon offers exciting family-friendly attractions, events, world-renowned celebrities, and a variety of comic creators, including Geof Isherwood. Currently residing in Ottawa, Ontario, Geof Isherwood began drawing for Marvel in 1982 and later on for DC Comics. His first full issue was Daredevil 203, which led to regular series runs on Swords of the Swashbucklers, Conan the King, Conan the Barbarian, the Nam, Suicide Squad, Doctor Strange, and Namor, along with numerous short runs and one-off titles such as Spider-Man and Thor. In 1999, Geof branched out into film, first doing concept art for Battlefield Earth. This gave him recognition in the Montreal film production community, and since then he's worked on over 100 productions, notably 2 X-Men films, Days of Future Past and Age of Apocalypse. Geof has done a variety of jobs including storyboards for movies to animation to prop design to set decoration, paintings, and posters. Currently, Geof illustrated Fire and Ice Nekron 1, and created cover art for a variety of popular comic book series, including Savage Sword of Conan. So, without further ado, here's my chat with Geof Isherwood about his comic book projects and his artistic style. So, Geof Isherwood, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Oh, sure, why not?
Well, I appreciate your time.
How's that for a standard answer?
Absolutely. Well, before I get going with all the questions, I would like to ask you, what was the first comic book that you read?
That I read? Am I supposed to remember back that all? When I was a little kid? One thing I did like was Peanuts. I had to, of course, would see the comics in the newspaper. This would have been mid-'60s. And then I would get the little paperback book compilations and just read through those. So that's probably the first thing. Cool.
Yeah, good stuff growing up. But I'm wondering, who or what inspires you to create today?
When the phone rings. You know, the famous Sammy Kahn, the songwriter, that was his thing. It was like 100 years ago. Somebody said, "What, Sammy, you've written so many songs. What inspires you when the phone rings?" Well, now it's usually an email, but you know.
Do you have any artists that you refer to or reflect upon when you're doing your own art?
Yes, here and there. Often, if I'm working on a specific character, I will look at artists who have come before, which usually is the case, because I always felt it was a good idea to keep up the feel of the original character so readers wouldn't pick up a comic and go, "What's this? It's nothing like what I used to read." I would say specifically if I need to do some very elaborate line work inking, I just go have a look again at my Bernie Wrightson Frankenstein book. Otherwise, it really depends on the job.
Right. Yeah, you can't go wrong with Wrightson. He's definitely a classic. You've got your hands in a lot of projects these days. Is there anything you could talk about that you're working on today?
Right now, I'm working on storyboards for a film. It's going to be made here in Ontario. The writer, producer, director person is Kim Barr. And so she contacted me a couple months ago about getting this whole idea together. So I'm doing that with her, but she's looking for some more funding. She already has funding, but she's looking for more. And part of that is a graphic novel of the film. So I've been doing some extra work on these storyboards. I've been finishing them in color and giving the look so much the same idea of what she wants to film, if I can put it that way. The color, the composition, and all that. So if you see those, then you get a good feel of what the film would be. And therefore, I can continue that idea with the graphic novel if all this goes through okay, and hopefully it will.
Oh, wish you luck on that for sure. I did notice that you recent comic book work did a cover of Savage Sword of Conan, which is great. I know that we met up, golly, I think it was New York Comicon a couple of years ago, and you said you were working on this Conan stuff. So is that something you prefer, comic book work?
Oh, sure. Comics it's always great. Conan was particularly nice to do, especially getting that surprise 2-issue, 96 pages of Conan for Savage Sword would be a couple of years now. Well, I did that in 23, then 24 and 25 just finished. Well, in 23 in San Diego in July, I met Sarah Frazetta, who is Frank's granddaughter. And she, in fact, walked up to my wife, Amanda, when we were at a panel, and she says, "Is Geof exclusive with the Titan and the Conan people?" And she says, "Oh, no." So she comes and talks to me and says, "I'd love to work with you on a couple of things." And she mentioned one project which still has not happened, but in the meantime, she wanted me to draw the Fire and Ice Nekron story, and that has just come out before Christmas. It's kind of an odd time to release it, I guess, but it had already been delayed a couple of times, so that's when they could release it. That's the most recent comic work. Otherwise, there is this very likely graphic novel with this film, which is a psychological horror film. So it's not slasher, it's more mind games. There's that. And as far as film work goes, there is this one. There's also a huge project, which I suspect may not really start till the end of the year. Maybe earlier. I would say earlier in terms of pre-production design stuff, and even that would have a graphic novel attached to it. It all sounds very nebulous at the moment and non-specific, but that's how things go these days.
Right, exactly. Well, fingers crossed it all works out. Yeah.
Yeah, NDAs and this, that, and the other. And, that idea has been going for a good 10 years in the mind of the writer, and he's putting the pieces together. So that looks very promising.
Great. Well, at the end of the day, then, I'm looking at your bio, you've been working doing not only comic books, but as you said, storyboards, posters. What is your favorite creative medium? When someone were to sit you down and say, "Okay, Geof, which one is it?"
I always like going back to comics. That's really what I trained to do in the first place and all that. However, I have to say, getting really involved in a film doing storyboards is one thing. You sit down with the director, you work out plans, and then your job is finished, and they go off and make the movie. To get involved directly in the actual filming, which I'm looking to do with either the one made here in Ontario and certainly the other bigger one, that's quite intriguing, I have to say. I have a lot to learn that way, even though I've worked in film for 25 years, but I rarely have been right in the middle of shooting and all that. It's pre-production time mostly. So I have certain ideas, maybe you could call it expertise in certain areas, and also on the writing side, I was able to have a lot more experience in terms of writing while teaching. That sounds odd, but I helped about 300 students script doctor their short comic book stories, and it really sharpened up my sense for character development and dramatic structure and all of that. So it's like from beginning to end, I feel like I have a bit more to offer in general. That's what I'm hoping is going to happen in the next while. And besides all that, of course, I always have commissions to do, and I always have a few of those, and those are always fun to do. And I got a couple yesterday. One was taking John Buscema sketches of characters. It was just like, the way he would just draw figures on a page. Well, you take a couple of those and then you build a whole world around it. It's Conan stuff. And then another one, he did a compilation of Neil Adams characters. Neil Adams drew it. So he's put them together. So he's sending that to me to ink it, and I said, well, I can do a Neil Adams thing very easily. Neil's one of the artists I started off learning from when I was young. So you were asking influences. Well, Neil was certainly one. Buscema was another, along with people like Gil Kane and Gene Colan and Kirby. And, that's a wide range.
Oh, yeah, that's for sure.
Roger Smith, the studio artist, Kaluta. That's a wide range of artists. And I think in time, as I've gotten to understand the drawing process and how people work, my range of influences simply expanded.
Right. Well, speaking of drawing, I wonder if we could switch gears a wee bit and talk about the tools you use to create your art. I wonder if you could walk me through your process there.
Okay, well, it usually starts with the brain, because without that, you got AI, and then, you're up the creek. With a paddle that doesn't really understand what it is, and it bends, and it comes out of the hand funny. So that's an AI paddle. Generally, I will draw. I just have pencils. I often pencil. When I'm penciling a long time ago, I went with mechanical pencils because I don't have to stop and sharpen them all the time. And then for inking, I have nibs, which I dip in the ink bottle, and I have lots and lots of nibs I've acquired over time. A neighbor across the street, she passed away, and my parents were taking care of all of her stuff, and they found this box of like 200 nibs, so became mine. So I got to try them out, and I'm using them to this day. Here I'll try one here and there. Some are better for tighter lines, some are very loose, different kinds of stuff. For brushes, I have gone away from the old Winsor & Newton Series 7 because while they were terrific back when I was working at Marvel in the mid-'80s, and that's now 40 years ago, and Marvel, they would have a drawer full and say, here, have some, just use these for inking. The quality isn't the same, but I tend to use the Pentel brush pen, which has been around a long time also. I like those. And I also use the Faber-Castell markers often for filling in large black areas. Ink is very dark. It matches up well. And as far as the brush pens they have, the Fude ones, Fude, which I think is a Japanese term for a certain type of brush pen, which they make, I will use those at conventions because the line is good and I don't have to carry an ink bottle, which could spill and make a big mess. I tend not to use those at home. I also do work digitally when the job calls for it. It's usually film work, but on a few comic book jobs, I have worked digitally as well. And I still use Photoshop, and I have a Wacom computer, and, I just do that. I do either coloring. What I like to use are the Derwent water-soluble coloring pencils because I can work in a lot of small detail and subtle shading, and then you draw it with that, and then you wet it down, and then it looks like watercolor. Otherwise, I do some acrylic, some oil paint on occasion. Otherwise, I color digitally when necessary. The most recent example of that would be the Nekron comic. I have a color artist here in town I work with, but she wasn't feeling too well after she got through about a third of the way through the comic, so I just went and finished it. Not a problem. And there's also color theory, which you can talk about, which I look at a lot of what goes on in film. And so I use those ideas in comics as well in terms of setting up mood, setting up color saturation, higher or lower, all this kind of thing, trying to create a good balance in the picture rather than just, say you're doing a team book and costumes are all different colors, and it can look just like a big, colorful mess. But I try to organize everything, and so it has more of a readable feel to it.
Thanks for sharing that. I understand you're going to be exhibiting at the Toronto Comicon. What are you looking forward to most at that event?
Well, I do know a number of people there, and otherwise it's pretty much the same as most conventions where it's fun to meet fans. A lot of times I will have done commissions for people and they can either pick them up, or I've done one previously and I get to meet that fan in person, which is always very nice to do. Plus, getting to meet up again with some of our colleagues is always good. Because sometimes I like to say, if I want to see my friends, I have to get on a plane. But at least from here, we can just drive over from Ottawa, so it's not too bad a deal.
Well, with everything that you have going on today and in the future, where do you recommend that people go online to find out more about you?
I have a website, geoffisherwood.ca, which should be updated more frequently, but there is information there. Otherwise, I'm primarily posting on Facebook, and I have a Fans of Geof Isherwood page, or Jeffrey Isherwood, I think it says, Fans of. So that's for professional work that I'm doing, and I will post here and there. Something that happens with that is a lot of it are commissions, and I have to wait till the person receives the artwork before I can post it. So sometimes things seem a bit delayed, but that's where I keep up information on what I'm doing now, what I can show. That's another side of it. And what shows I'm going to be doing. I have a personal page as well, and for that information, I make those posts public. A lot of things I have for friends only because it's just minor stuff that doesn't really deal with artwork and that business side itself. I also have an Instagram. I'm not on social media constantly posting things like a lot of people. Most of the time I'm drawing instead. I have work to do, and I probably should have a better, more steady presence, but I don't really worry about it too much.
Thanks to Geof for the chat. You can discover more about Geof Isherwood online at geoffisherwood.ca and on Instagram at Geof_Isherwood. And that's Geof, Geof_Isherwood. And thank you for tuning in to the True North Country Comics podcast. I invite you to visit the True North Country Comics website to listen to even more conversations about creators on making comic books and graphic novels. I also encourage you to subscribe via the website so you'll be notified about new podcast interviews and article posts. This podcast is available wherever podcasts are enjoyed. Please like, follow, and subscribe. You can follow along True North Country Comics on most social media sites. And you're encouraged to send any and all feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks for tuning in, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2026.